Welcome back once again to Wilken Property Services Real Estate Podcast. We talk matters real estate. You've seen some of our shows on security deposits, on what property management actually means, and as a landlord, what are some of the benefits, that you get when you deal with the professionals like Wilken Property Services. And of course, in the few weeks to come, we'll talk about the entire act. What does it mean? What are we operating? Do you even understand the act itself? We'll talk construction, all those things. We'll talk how do you detect fake land titles. Oh, that's going to be a good one, because some of us, even right now, we are seated with fake land titles. But today on the show, we're talking agreements. If you're a landlord, if you're a tenant, what agreement works for you specifically, especially when it comes to managing those relationships. Joining me today on the show is Nabafu Sharon, who is legal manager at Wilken Property Services. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. I'm very honored to be part of this show.
So, Sharon, talk to us about the agreements that feature in some of these relationships. I'm a tenant and I've seen a property. What defines that relationship between me and the landlord?
Okay, thank you, Brian. Once again, I'm very honored to be part of this show. So what actually defines the legal relationship between the tenant and the landlord? For us as Wilken, it's the tenancy agreement. The tenancy agreement defines how our relationship is going to move, right from the onset and also the end. Yes, I'm aware that different forms in which a tenancy can be developed there. Sometimes they can be written or oral. But for us at Wilken, we center around the written agreements. So it's a tenancy agreement that defines our relationship.
And I was going to ask, oral agreements, they sound so dangerous. Someone can change their mind anytime. So for the tenancy agreement, what are some of the things as a tenant I should watch out for? Even as a landlord, if I'm listening, what must I include in that agreement?
Okay, that's a really nice one. So for the tenancy agreement, there are key features that actually must be in every tenancy agreement. The real first one is the description of both parties. That's the tenant and actually the landlord. You must have a detailed description of your tenant. The name, the national ID, the place of work, next of kin. You need an alternative contact. Haven't you heard stories of, you find that someone actually passes on at an estate, and you clearly have no contact of that person. So that's why it's very important to have the next of kin.
They came alone. So what if they refuse to declare their next of kin?
No, you must be able to ask them. Right. Because some people are actually in Kampala and people don't know where they actually stay. Right. So you actually need the next of kin as an alternative contact in case you can't get them. So the details of the landlord also apply. You need to know the landlord or the property manager that you're actually entering into a contract with. So from there, there must be an aspect about rent. That's the reserved rent must be clear. How much is the house you're entering into? How much is the premises that you're using? On top of that, also the reserved rent, you must know the mode of payment. It could either be bank, it could either be cash.
And that has to be stated from the onset?
Yes. And for us, in our setting, we don't accept cash. It's very clear, it's actually bold. All our payments are paid on bank accounts, which are provided to each and every tenant that we actually have. Then also concerning the rent, there's an aspect of security deposit, which I'm sure in the last episode, it was well articulated. Yes. So for security deposit, it must be an equivalent of a month's rent. So it must also be there. And there are also surrounding aspects concerning security deposit. And that, I'm sure, was very discussed by a colleague of mine. So on also reserved rent, there must be an aspect on revision of rent. That's rent increment.
Revision, when?
Rent reduction.
But
at the onset, it must be clear, Brian. Yes. Otherwise, you're going to enter into tenancies where someone can just wake up and increase your rent. Or sometimes the landlord must also be very clear to the tenant when rent should actually be revised. So those aspects must all be there. Then there must be an issue of duties of the tenant and also duties of the landlord to the tenant. They must be clearly spelled out in the tenancy agreement. Then there must be an aspect of termination. And in termination, that's also the notice period should be catered for. When to terminate and what notice period to give. Your mode of communication should be very clear in the tenancy agreement. So all those aspects, when it comes to failure to parent, all those aspects should be there. Payment of utilities, those are also duties that should actually be in there. And all tenancy agreements must be signed. But what is very key to all these features of a tenancy agreement, they must be in accordance with the current landlord and tenant law of 2022. So if you keep writing things that contravene the act, you're wasting
Does that
time.
mean that agreement then is null and void?
Yes, that is why I want to tell property owners that you need to get someone that is knowledgeable. You need a legal, like at Wilken, we have a legal team that will be able to scrutinize each agreement to make sure it's in accordance with the law. So instead of struggling to go and look for a lawyer, to go to call lawyers, to go call a lawyer friend, a lawyer cousin, just bring it to...
I think that's what we do all the time. We get even someone who doesn't understand, property and stuff, just a usual lawyer, and then they even give us they work the agreement to annoy the landlord. It becomes quite impossible.
Very. So it's the reason as to why you need someone that is knowledgeable, because it's something beyond what the eye can see. So you need a company that is knowledgeable, and Wilken has it.
Right. Last week we talked about, how someone can become a client of Wilken. Are there different contracts that you give? Because at that point it is me, the landlord, coming to you as Wilken to start managing my property for me. What's that relationship like?
Okay. The landlords, in most cases, we are as property managers or property agents, we work as agents for the landlord. So we work on behalf of the landlord. But for that relationship to kickstart, we must have an agreement, which we call the management agreement or the management contract. So in that contract, it spells out clearly what particular things we are going to do on behalf of the landlord. Because there are things as property managers we might not do on behalf of the landlord. But clearly, where in our property management agreement, we make sure that the aspects that the landlord expects us to do are clearly stipulated. They are clearly detailed. You get? Because we know as landlords come to us to render a service.
Yeah.
You get? Which service is also, that's why, okay, if I can talk about that service, it also entails those tenancy agreements we actually enter into with tenants on their behalf. So that management agreement usually has, like I've explained in the tenancy agreement, the descriptions of both parties, that's the client. Yeah. There are things we need from the client when they are coming on board. That's their national IDs, their names, their passport photos. So it's sort of like a detailed description of each of them. Then the agreement also has the commission percentages, how much we charge, which is also clear in there, depending on the property and depending on the negotiations we actually have. It also has the services we offer, which are very clear. Yeah. Yes, which is property management, and they come along with rent collection, full tenancy occupancy, maintenance of the areas, monitoring of utilities. Brian, I'm sure you have come across situations where someone pays rent, but they don't pay their water bill. Yeah. You get? Yeah. So, and as a landlord, surely, for me at the moment I see a message on my phone, rent paid, I am done. I forget that beyond the rent, there is a utility that is supposed to be paid, which is like water. So those are things that we also monitor. Then there must be a termination clause, which is very common to all agreements, which should clearly state the notice period on when that should happen. There must be duties of the landlord and also of the property manager as a person. And then there must be a clause on liability, and then they must all be witnessed.
If you're watching us and you're a tenant, talk to us about some of the challenges that you face when it comes to some of these contracts. We are aware that some landlords don't even give you, contracts. As long as you agree that I'll pay you at 800,000 shillings, so the agreements are on WhatsApp message, and then that's it. When the landlord wants to develop their property, they will tell you next week I'm bringing the trucks to start work. So you can talk to us in the chat box or call us directly, and we'll give you information that you need. Help me understand. If I'm a landlord right now, I have my property, can I just come to Wilken and you help me draft the agreement without necessarily handing over my property to you?
Okay. Yes, we offer that service. You can walk into our offices and we draft for you that agreement. But, like I said, you get, I can draft for you an agreement and you fail to actually execute it. Yes, I can draft for you an agreement and you still fail to understand how to actually deal with your tenant. Because dealing with a tenant is more than just what we see, Brian. As we are able as a company to detect inabilities for you to pay. Because we have landlords that walk into our offices, they ask us to execute for them agreements. 5 months down the road, they are back. You see, the other agreement you worked on, the tenant has not paid me for 5 months.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but when it comes to us, we'll still, first of all, we screen.
The tenants?
Yes. That's already one advantage. Why I'm trying to tell you, it's better you give us the service to manage rather than an agreement. On top of screening, like I told you, we detect. There are tenants, you see tenants, there are tenants who have the money and don't want to pay. But they're like, this landlord are innocent. Has a lot of money. They have a lot of money, you get.
They have so many properties,
Thank
so they
you.
can't wait for me.
Then there's a tenant who actually does not have the money, but has not accepted that they can't handle that house. You get? Then there is a tenant who's just going through a phase that they would maybe do a payment plan so that they come back. But you see, as a landlord, you do not have that time.
Right.
You don't have that time to detect, to sit and detect and say, okay, Brian can't manage, Brian can manage.
Yeah.
You get? Those are only things that can be done by a professional.
Yeah.
You get? And those are the things that's what is like our daily meal at Wilken.
So good.
We can detect you and like, Brian.
Chireke, tofana ansi. Insi tofana yo, or you can, okay, this is 1 million, but Mulondo, there's a house of 500. Okay.
You get? We even know how to tactfully remove you from 1 million to 500. You get? You actually leave saying, these people talked to me. You get?
Yeah.
But you see, as a landlord, you barely don't have that time. You barely have that time to do so. So yes, we offer the service, but like I've said, you're better off handing over the whole property for management to Wilken.
Thank you again, Sharon, for explaining some of these things. You've heard it. You might be having challenges enforcing some of these agreements. Some of you don't even have contracts at all. Some of you don't even know the landlords of some of these buildings. You are working through, say, the gate man. He's the one who tells you, landlord yagambye no, nyumba jivemu. Yeah? You don't know that relationship. If you're having some of these challenges, type in the chat and tell us those things that you're experiencing. But most importantly, I encourage you to come to Wilken Property Services. Our offices are located on Entebbe Road in Najana Nkumbi, opposite the FDC offices. You'll see a nice building, pink for the men who are colorblind, yeah? But for the ladies, it's magenta. I'm told those are the colors, magenta, right? Or in Tinda at the Matters Drive, yeah? So the road going to UNEB. Just next to the traffic lights, you'll see our signpost, Wilken Property Services. And let's make sure we help you make some good business out of your property business. Until next time, bye-bye.